Hello and welcome to the Klassiki Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Goff. Klassiki is your window into the world of Eastern European film. Subscribers gain access to our library of classic and contemporary titles, as well as filmmaker interviews, video introductions, program notes, and much more. You can sign up for a free trial today at klassiki.online. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to subscribe in your podcast app of choice, and remember you can always get in touch with us at podcast@klassiki.online. This week sees the return of one of the highlights of London's cinematic calendar, the 40th edition of the BFI Flare Festival, the largest LGBTQ+ film festival in Europe. One of the world premieres at Flare this year is To Dance Is to Resist, a new documentary from German filmmaker and musician Julian Lautenbacher. Julian has spent 5 years travelling to Ukraine to document the personal and professional lives of Jay and Vol'demar, dancers in Kyiv's vibrant underground queer club scene. His film captures a couple and a community finding their way through wartime hardship, juxtaposing striking scenes of dance performance with domestic portraits and visions of a capital city under attack. Ahead of the festival, I spoke with Julian about his experiences working in Kyiv, the idea of dance culture as a form of resistance during invasion, and the cultural connections and contrasts between Germany and Ukraine. BFI Flare Festival is running from the 18th to the 29th of March, and at the time of recording there were still a few tickets available for the screenings of To Dance Is to Resist this coming week. The links for that are in the show description, along with more information about the festival and Klassiki's own queer cinema programming. Julian, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm super happy to be here and tell you a little bit about the film.
Well, it's great to have you, and it's great to have the rare opportunity to talk about a film ahead of its world premiere. Very exciting. So congratulations on that. Yeah, so I thought we could start with a basic starter question, which is that this film seems to be kind of unfolding and reacting to these kind of incredible events in real time. You know, that you were already in situ in Kyiv, you already had kind of been building these relationships and meeting these people before the war started. So I'd love to know a little bit about how you met Jay and Vol'demar and their community, like how you came to work in Kyiv and so on. And, you know, what was the situation for you at the point at which the full-scale invasion happened, which is when the film kind of kicks off, if you like.
Yeah. Let me tell you, let me go back a little bit in time, because I started approaching this film very unconventional. I didn't go to film school or anything. I actually studied music, but grew up in a family where there was always a camera around, and there were some filmmakers and photographers. So this medium always was felt natural to me, but I never considered it as something, external. And I kind of was working in music all my 20s, and then I had this idea. I started writing a little bit more, and I wrote this concept paper for this film after going to Kyiv a couple times in early 2021, mainly for the club, to be honest, because I grew up in Germany with the club culture, and electronic music was very embedded in my socialization and so on, and it's still a big love of mine. And then we mainly traveled there really for club visits during COVID, because everything was closed in Berlin. So we went there to dance really on a long weekend, and then I was really fascinated by the community there, and just the rawness and honesty and the warmth this community was radiating. And then I wrote this concept paper, and eventually was lucky that I got a little funding post-COVID. And with this funding, I moved to Kyiv in late 2021, and I started basically networking first of all, because what I mean with unconventional is that I I kind of started from scratch, and the film, the concept paper was very like broad. In the beginning, I wanted to make a film about the invisible bond between Kyiv and Tbilisi in Georgia, actually, because I've also been in
Okay.
Georgia, and there's this friendship between these two cities, but you can't really name it. And somehow they always had also politically Russia as a suppressor, you know, since a long time. And somehow there's this in the queer and dance community, there's this bond, and I do events, and I want to explore this a
Yeah, I
bit
was
more.
going
And
to
I was
say
even
Tbilisi is another big kind of clubbing and queer clubbing center
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
region.
exactly. It's also very a beautiful city, and the people are also very, very warm and beautiful there. And I've been there for research even in December 2021 because I was like, okay, I was based in Kyiv. I moved there. I even rented an apartment. I was like, I'm gonna stay here at least 2 years to, to not make a film which is like which feels like someone is looking on the scene and the topic, but someone who's inside and then it's like sharing from the inside and
Right.
actually becomes a part of it. And I really want to immerse myself there. That's why it took a long time to actually get to know everyone, to be in the club every week and to kind of, network, get to know the people, get to know the community, and then to continue with your question, it was very unexpected with the war because I was still in Kyiv on the 24th of February to 22, myself and Podil, and I woke up quite late that day, and just realized that the full-scale invasion has started when I woke up because the neighbors were in the street with their suitcases, rolling or running to the train station. We checked,
Mm.
my friend and me. Everything was booked out. You couldn't leave the country. The funny thing is that I even had a flight on that day, which was canceled, kind
Wow.
of. And in Kiev, there was not so much panic that the war is going to start, to be honest, because for Ukrainians, the war is basically still already going on since 12 years. For the West, it's now 4 years, but they're kind of used to the state that there might be something happening, so nobody was taking it serious. And I was there, and I was kind of also affected by this mood. And also I thought, okay, it's gonna be fine. There's no full-scale invasion happening. It's just tension, like political tensions Russia's putting towards Kyiv or Ukraine once again. And then eventually I also managed with a close friend of mine, she's also Ukrainian, to get on a train in the evening. We were starting to panic and nothing was working, and kind of tried to stay calm, and we kind of made a plan the whole day, and then we just took our most valuable items and went to the main train station in Kiev, and we were hoping that we would get on a train because all the trains were booked out. And then they were so kind and just let us. They were literally letting everyone on the train, which
Mm.
was going to Poland, and we were sitting on the floor on the train, incredibly scared and tired, and this was definitely a very marking experience that day. And then, to be honest, when I got back to Berlin, I had a bit of a depressive phase because just everything which I kind of started to build or how I planned the next 2 years just, disappeared from one day to another, and I didn't
Yeah.
know which direction to take. I made really big commitments. I kind of subletted my apartment here in Berlin for 2 years. And I stayed with friends probably for 3, 4 months until I found another apartment and slowly grappled myself up again and realized that I actually, especially now, need to continue making this film. And yeah, the interesting thing was also that nobody thought that the war would continue.
Yeah.
So everyone was keeping their apartments. I was like, I kept my apartment in Kiev. And then I realized I cannot afford paying two rents. And then I went back the first time in September to 22 to kind of handle these things. And when I was there, I think this was the click moment where I understood I'm going to continue making this film. And then I kind of traveled every 3 or 4 months to Kiev and just started documenting my friends basically and documenting the community. And it was a very natural process, I think, that I was just always there and with a camera. I was also the DOP in the beginning until I met Ghana. I was just doing this basically by myself and my friends the first years because this was going on for 5 years, right? This the production of the film.
Maybe I can just add a little context for people. So the
Yeah.
film goes from, the first day of the invasion in February 22 up to kind of December 2025. So you must have been editing right up to the last minute if you were shooting until just
Hmm.
December just gone. And like you say, it's kind of based presumably around these trips you were able to make every couple of months. What was it like maintaining those relationships and then kind of jumping in and out of filming like that over such a long period of time?
It really became my second home, Kyiv. I really felt like I was living between these two cities, Berlin and Kyiv. And it was not easy at times. I was like, every time I was coming back to Berlin, it took me a couple days to actually realize that I'm in Berlin again and everything is safe. Because also my nervous system started to really react after some time, after 2, 3 years, I could really feel like the differences when I was going to Kyiv and when I was going back to Berlin, and this was always a strange reality shift with a lot of different emotions and kind of, when you travel from Berlin to Kyiv, you have to take the train, right? Because the whole
Yeah.
airspace is closed in Kyiv, so it's always a 25, 26 hours trip if you're lucky and everything works out. And during this trip, it's always like a bit of a therapeutical journey also, I feel like, because you have all this time, which we're not used to today anymore, right? We take an airplane and a couple hours later, we are in a completely different place in the world. And it's
Mm.
kind of when you take the train, I really started to like this way of traveling over the years also, because you kind of process what you experienced in this time frame when you're in transit, which is quite, I think, much more healthy in a way also. And I kind of adapted, and the relationships with all the friends, I always felt close, I think, during this time, because for me it was important as a filmmaker to not separate myself now from what is happening in Kyiv and from my friends there. I didn't want to treat myself different than all the Ukrainians or all the, male socialized people which can't escape Ukraine anymore, like Jay and Vol'demar, right? Like
Yeah.
in their passport, they are considered male, and so therefore they can't leave the country. And for me, it was important that I'm just there with them. Even sometimes I was also just present. I was also not constantly filming. This was very important for me because I think I follow a bit of a humanistic approach in this film. So the people are quite important to me on the set, on the project, in the community. So was quite connecting because you have these moments also when there's air raid alarm and you sit at home, or there's blackouts and everyone sits in the dark, and you have these club nights, and then you have after hours where everyone is like, this is the only moments where you can forget everything. And when you have a lot of these together, it really like brings you together also with your friends and the people there. And I think this created a really strong bond between us.
Well, one thing that I really appreciate about the film, which kind of ties in, I think, to what you're saying, is how much it combines a focus on like the domestic life of this couple, Jay and Voldemar, as
Mhm.
well as a lot of attention to the discipline and the process and rehearsal behind dancing, and then the kind of freedom and performance of the dancing and the club itself. So you do really get a sense of the kind of the couple, the relationship, right at the heart of the film between this couple, Jay and Voldemar. Like, can you tell us a little bit about that balancing out those different kinds of material, like the domestic world, the rehearsal, the routine, the discipline, and then the freedom and the performance of the dancing in the club?
Sure. I was happy that you recognized it and also commented positively on it, because it was quite a challenge to actually get this balance in the edit, that it comes
Mm.
through, because on the other hand, it was very important to me because all these different moments kind of show a different side of these two characters, like the cinematic structure of this film, like you say, is basically divided into everyday life, rehearsal and discipline and performance. And for example, the domestic scenes, you can really feel a different vulnerability and intimacy between the two because they are
Yeah, absolutely.
themselves,
Yeah.
and you get these very candid moments, which we were able to catch as we spent a lot of time together. And then the rehearsal scenes, which are more revealing the discipline and the labor between the artistic expression, really. I think a lot of people don't realize how much discipline and work goes into dance in general, that you actually get this connection with your body going, requires a lot of dedication, really,
Yeah.
which I was quite inspired with these two to see them, every day they were doing something, stretching, working out, going to rehearsals, teaching, and you can get this feeling when you see them also in their professional context on these dance scenes. And then, we have this quite stylized performances, which we are also showing. I always say that I was trying to make a hybrid with this film,
Hmm.
because cinematography is quite important to me, and I want to combine, a real story, so documentary filmmaking language, with also, a certain cinematic quality, and also a bit of a, that sometimes it could feel like a bit of a surrealistic fever dream, maybe in some parts. So we have these performances, which I think transformed their personal experience a little bit, symbolically or as emotional expression, really. And I think as they're such talented performers and dancers, even me, I know them very well, but it really moves me when I see them, performing or dancing. And one moment was quite special on set because I gave them directing this was I gave them a lot of freedom. Most of these performances are actually improvised performances. I always gave them just a theme, basically what the idea is, what we're trying to, which themes we're trying to transmit with a certain performance. And then I was giving this to them and we talked about it. And then we were actually starting shooting with most of these. And this art platformer shooting was very, very moving. It's the one where they're, topless. It
Hmm.
was super hot that day. I think it was 45 degrees in Kyiv. It was
Oof.
insane. It was like a heat wave happening that day. And we were in this old Soviet silk factory, very like brutalistic in architecture, and I don't know, just a huge space, and we couldn't open the windows because it's such an old building. So it was extra hot. I was even, I was almost naked there on set because we were all sweating like crazy. And somehow this removed, I think, these conditions also removed a certain layer of, or added towards a layer of being complete in the moment, and you can really feel. I love the images and kind of the performance which came out of this. As it is, basically, I think it's one of the key scenes of the film, as it basically tells their story of resistance through their dance. And I feel like,
Right.
they start like separately, and then over during the course of the performance, they get closer, they save each other. And then there's also a bit of homoerotic parts where they get very gentle with each other and they touch each other. And this juxtaposing with this quite like rough music. Yeah, did
Yeah.
this answer your question? I
Oh, yeah, no,
drifted a
totally.
little
Yeah.
bit.
I mean, no, it's just making me think of more questions, which is always the case. I mean, yeah, also I really appreciate that for a film so much about kind of bodily and physical performance, it gives a lot of room to these people to express, I guess you call it their philosophy of the relationship between body and mind and how that relates to resistance. And I guess this is the kind
Mhm.
of big question that I did want to get into a bit, which is this idea of resistance. This is the idea at the heart of the film. It's in the title of the film, and the film is about, I guess, the different kinds of resistance during wartime, during invasion and occupation, than otherwise kind of make the headlines, right? It's about personal or communal sense of self and resistance, as opposed to this kind of national military resistance. And, you know, it's in the title, right? To dance is to resist. That's a pretty affirmative statement. But it is in the film also posed more as a question. There's a point where I think it's Jay kind of asks out loud, could a club be a place of resistance, or are we just trying to convince ourselves? I mean, like, how did you and Jay and Vol'demar and the rest of this kind of dance community talk about or understand resistance? Like, how did you end up with this idea of resistance at the core of the film?
Yeah, maybe I start with the conditions this all started, because, you know, I never planned to make a film which is so affected by the war, right?
Sure.
It's always important also to say that for me, because there's also, I realized going back and forth that, of course, a lot of journalists, they travel because of the war, because it's like, it's also fascinating in a strange way, but they just travel also. Some people also travel there for not the best reasons, because there's a war and they want to, you know, document it, or they want to do journalism about it, which I noticed. And I never planned that, and then it became a part of it. So during wartime, somehow this topic of resistance is often only understood in military terms, like you mentioned, right? And I think we also consciously don't make such a strong statement about the war, because this is just a condition, but the focus of this film is a very different one. And for many people, resistance, you know, also takes a much quieter form than, you know, these military terms. And one of them is maintaining community is super important in this club, and everything which was connected with the club: community coffee, community motion, all these spaces which the club created is really a place of resistance for the community, protecting spaces of freedom, basically, also where people can gather, and where they can feel released and free and safe during this time. And another point, I think, of resistance is continuing artistic expression, really, which is also a counterpoint in this film, and supporting each other emotionally, you know. So I think Jay's question, we posted there because it kind of acknowledges somehow this tension, you know. They are asking themselves this question, really. So the characters asking themselves and reflecting on whether what they're doing is truly matters in the context of war, right?
Yeah.
Because this is also, it is sometimes really on the edge of staying sane and insanity during these days in Kyiv, you know. It's very mentally challenging environment. So of course they reflect on towards this, and they're not ignorant towards it. But still, I think the statement of the film, "To dance is to resist," is really that the artistic community finds also many different forms and ways to reflect on what is happening, and also to react towards it, you know, in an artistic way. And I think becomes clear that it is not an ignorant community which is just having fun on parties, you know, which some critical voices might say, but it's much more reflected, and it is their own way to process this emotionally, and to actually, you know, cope with this and stay sane and do their own contribution in these circumstances, really, you know. And I think rather than giving a definite answer, the film allows the audience to reflect on the idea that preserving humanity and connection can also be kind of a form of resistance, really.
Right, yeah. And it's also, you know, there's this idea, again, kind of implicit in the film, that what will this kind of resistance and this great loss be for, if in the Ukraine of the future, you know, there isn't space for this kind of freedom and this kind of human flourishing, right? I think you do kind of, even though the war is kind of almost surprisingly distant from the screen a lot of the time, you do really embed these people in Kyiv. There's you do situate us very much in Kyiv. I got a real strong sense of wartime Kyiv. There are a lot of kind of establishing shots, drone shots, and you do show, for instance, kind of people volunteering to clear snow from the roads during the winter, for instance. Like this, there is this sense and focus on the kind of the voluntary and the communal and the local and the small scale in a way that I think really chimes with the kind of dance studio and the dance community that you're focusing on.
Yeah, this was actually. Are you commenting on the shuffling lady, which we have a strong
It just came
with?
to mind where you were
Yeah.
talking there. This sequence where we see a woman shoveling snow.
Yeah, this was actually, I mean, from a filmmaking point, we were super happy that we kind of catch this moment, because the backstory of this was that Gunnar and me, we got up really early that day to start filming, the empty Kyiv, and it was snowing that day, so we got up I think at 4:30 or 5 a.m. already, and then we were walking through Kyiv, kind of trying to catch a few of these shots when the city is still really quiet and soft and white, really, which is really beautiful there. And then we met this woman, and what she's saying is really powerful in a way, because somehow this is her way of coping with what is happening, right? And if you look at it closely, it really doesn't make any sense to shovel snow in this moment because there's so much of it, right?
And it's still
But
snowing.
she's just doing it and doing it, and she's saying, what we really need is clear air and clean air and the stop of the war, And then she runs away, basically. And I feel like this sequence says so much about also other people, also elderly people who are in Kyiv, and nobody talks about them. And I think there's so much over focus of warfare and the war that people forget, the West forgets about all the individuals which are struggling by themselves.
Yeah.
And also counterpoint on your comment on Kyiv, I think Kyiv is really the third protagonist in this film, So
Absolutely.
There's Jay, there's Vol'demar, and there's also Kyiv. And of course the community, but I count this towards Jay and Vol'demar. But Kyiv has a voice there, and sometimes it has a bit of an apocalyptic voice also.
Yeah, I mean, watching the film, I was reminded of this period, I guess, in the kind of 2010s when Kyiv was the latest in the line of cities to be declared the new Berlin in terms of its club culture, as focused around the Podil region that you've mentioned. And that in itself is kind of touching to think about just a few years ago, the way in which the West was engaging with this city and with these people and with this scene, and now how the focus is kind of almost by necessity completely shifted. But so in that sense, the film is a really important corrective.
I think, when the West started calling Kyiv the new Berlin, I was always very opposed to this term new Berlin, because Kyiv, once you've been there, you realize that the environment, the socialism in the past really created a very, very different community. And maybe you can compare it with, Berlin in the 90s when the wall just came down. But I felt like, why would people actually compare it and say it's the new Berlin, but it's a city by itself, right? And I was always telling people about what I think about it. It kind of irritated me that everyone was just calling it the new Berlin. And way before, I think as a lot of artists were going between these two cities, there was a lot of culture and artistic exchange happening already before. And, these ideas were traveling with the artists, which were going back and forth. So,
now, of course,
the quality of the electronic music is really high there.
And now, of course,
and also
there's
the artistic quality. Yeah.
There's there's such a huge Ukrainian diaspora in Germany and in Berlin. Now, I mean, there was already before the war, but now obviously there is an even greater one. So if the links between Berlin and Kyiv are even stronger now, and in a sense, one of the secondary aspects of your film that's so interesting is like as a document of this bond between these two cities that maybe started in pleasure and clubbing and then has kind of become this wartime phenomenon as well. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I can only encourage people, to also DJs and other artists to play in Kyiv or travel there for, contribution reasons. Because the community there is very cut off at the moment. There are no flights going anymore, right? So it's quite a commitment to travel to Kyiv. But everyone there is insanely happy if, a DJ comes and plays in Kirillivska, and people show up there and there's still, this exchange happening. And it really, of course, the scene really changed. There was so many internationals before, and now it has shifted because of the circumstances. But it's still a very beautiful community and very striving and very, very warm. And I'm always super inspired how much strength and positivity they bring to the table, to continue and continue creating and be present with each other and keep up a grain of hope still after these 4 years. Yeah, it's also, it gets emotional for me because every time I travel back, I can just travel back, and this is always on my mind lately, that I go there and then I can leave again, and I have to leave everyone behind. And over the years, it always got more difficult because I think the hope is also disappearing slowly. So yeah, it's been really a journey for me as a filmmaker as well, to document this for 5 years. It has definitely, I've really grown a lot through these very deep human experiences, but also I think I probably also gave a part of my soul to this film and telling the story, really. I think, reflect now on it.
That really comes across in the film, and it's great that people are going to get a chance to see it, and we'll include some links in the show description here in case there's a chance you can still get tickets to the screenings in London as part of the BFI Flare. But for now, I think we'll leave it there with that message. Julian Lautenbacher, thanks so much for the film, and thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me, Sam.